Chapter 10. Willow and Roselle barely made it to shore. Willow waded up the muddy bank at last and fell to his knees, coughing and spitting. He had to rest there a moment before he could get up and go to the hut where Elora Danan waited. He showed Roselle the baby, lying peacefully asleep.
"It is Elora Danan,"
Roselle murmured.
"At last, sky and earth rejoin. Isn't she beautiful?"
"That's Roselle," Rool whispered, staring at what appeared to be a talking possum. Franjean shrugged. "I don't know," he muttered dubiously. "I expected something more grand, less fuzzy." Roselle glanced at them, irritated.
"Willow, you must use the wand,"
she said.
"Turn me back into my human form."
Willow nodded. "Tell me what to do." He held the wand uncertainly, not even sure how to hold it.
"You're not a sorcerer?"
Roselle asked, frowning. "Yes." Willow looked down suddenly. "Sort of," he mumbled. "Well, I'm a farmer. But I know a few tricks and—"
"Tricks!"
Roselle cried, incredulous.
"Shalandria sent you? You can't just learn sorcery. It takes years and years."
She ran around the hut, raging and squeaking. Willow shrugged helplessly. "I'm sorry."
"Quiet,"
she commanded, pulling herself together.
"You must learn. Come away. There's an evil here."
She scurried out the door. Willow picked up the baby and followed her. He came out of the entrance and stopped dead. Madmartigan sat on a horse waiting for them, with 3 Nockmar soldiers beside him. The 2 brownies ducked inside, unnoticed, as Roselle tried to bolt away. One of the soldiers skewered her tail with his spear, stopping her escape. "Hi, Peck," Madmartigan said with a guilty grin. "Sorry about this," he shrugged. Willow glared up at him, speechless with anger. Why had he ever trusted Madmartigan? That worthless Daikini had betrayed them, he thought. The Nockmar sergeant snarled. "Keep your mouth shut." He knocked Madmartigan off his horse with a sudden, brutal blow. Madmartigan sprawled on the ground. Then Willow saw that Madmartigan's hands were bound behind him, his clothes were torn, and his back bore fresh, bloody lash marks. "You see," the sergeant said sourly, "I told you we'd find them anyway." More troops galloped to the hut. A soldier dismounted, came toward Willow, and tried to take the baby from his arms. Willow fought him, kicking and punching with all his strength. "No! Get away from her! You can't have her! Leave her alone!" Sorsha rode up with more of her men as the soldier knocked Willow to the ground. He handed the baby to her. "This is the baby we're looking for," she said. "We must take it back to Nockmar."
"Your mother can't overturn the prophecy,"
Roselle cried, dangling ignominiously from a spear.
"She hasn't the power."
"Fin Roselle," Sorsha studied her with a mocking smile. "Did you think my mother would let you escape?" At her nod, the soldiers tossed Roselle into a sack and tied it tightly. Madmartigan staggered to his feet in front of her, jostling a soldier aside. Sorsha stared at his tattered clothes from her saddle. "Lose your skirt?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I've still got what counts," Madmartigan said, matching her stare with his own. "Not for long." She kicked him in the jaw, knocking him off balance. Then she turned her horse and rode away. The Nockmar troops bound Willow's hands. Taking the prisoners with them, they rode away after their leader. Franjean and Rool came out of hiding as the soldiers disappeared and ran after them down the road. But their tiny legs were no match for the Nockmar steeds, and soon they flopped down in the dust, exhausted. "We'll never keep up with those horses," Rool gasped. "Then we have to track them," Franjean said. "You don't know how to do that," Rool protested morosely. "Besides, it would take forever. And even if we find them, they'll catch us, stick us in a cage, torture us, and finally devour us." Franjean looked at him. "Are you suggesting we go home?" Rool thought about it. "No," he shook his head. "This is more fun." They got up again and trotted down the road. Sorsha and a caravan of 50 Nockmar soldiers traveled on toward the snow-covered mountains where Nockmar Castle waited. Roselle rode captive in a small cage in the back of a wagon. Willow and Madmartigan struggled along in the choking dust behind her, chained to the wagon by their necks. Willow had to take 3 steps for every one that Madmartigan took just to keep up the pace. "I'm worried about Alora," Willow said. "She doesn't sound good." He could hear the baby crying up ahead. She had been crying all afternoon.
"Hurry!" Roselle called. "Try the chant again."
Willow tried to put Alora Dannon out of his mind and concentrate on the spells Roselle had been teaching him. Tana, Luth. I can't remember the middle part.
"Loctoir,"
Roselle said impatiently.
"That's the word that pleads for change."
Loctoir, Willow repeated with fresh determination. Loctoir. Sorcia rode up beside them, glowing with the confidence of command as she controlled her prancing stallion. She slowed its pace to match theirs.
"Sorcia, you remind me of your father,"
Roselle said. Sorcia frowned. "Don't insult me. He was a weakling."
"He was a warrior,"
Roselle answered gravely.
"and a great king."
"He was a traitor, an enemy of Nockmar."
"Your mother has poisoned you,"
Roselle said. Somewhere up ahead, the baby cried again. "Alora's cold and hungry," Willow dared to interrupt. She knows me. Please let me take care of her." "I don't need help from a peck," Sorcia sneered. She glanced away and caught Madmartigan staring at her. "What are you looking at?" "Your leg," he said. His expression changed. "I'd like to break it." Sorcia laughed. "You may find that difficult, slave, while I'm up here and you're down there." Madmartigan strained against his bonds. "Then come down here and take this chain off my neck." Sorcia smiled. "I'll take it off at your funeral." She spurred her horse up the line of troops. "I hate that woman," Madmartigan said as he rubbed his sore jaw. Late that day, a large Nockmar camp came into their view. Willow lifted his drooping head to see their destination more clearly. He stumbled and fell as his foot struck a stone. He was dragged along in the snow, too exhausted to fight his way to his feet again. Madmartigan ducked down and picked him up, hoisting the Nelwyn onto his own shoulders. The death dogs howled, and fires burned in the ominous dusk ahead. A hulking figure rode out to meet them, silhouetted by firelight. Bavmorda's General Kale. "Oh no, Kale," Madmartigan muttered. "That's all I need." Sorcia galloped up to Kale, with the baby under her arm. She showed Alora Dannon to him, and he howled like a beast in triumph. They rolled on into the camp together. "What are they going to do with her?" Willow cried, but no one answered him. When they arrived in the camp, more soldiers threw them into a makeshift prison cell, and then left them there alone. Madmartigan stood, keeping a lookout as Willow knelt over a bowl, mixing snow and dirt into a blob of mud. Roselle, still in her cage, hung from the roof of a nearby lean-to among stacks of skins and shields. She watched Willow work. "Hither watha, bairn deroo, bodak, belanocht," Willow chanted. "That's magic," Madmartigan said dubiously. "It smells terrible." "That's the life spark," Willow explained. "It forms after—" "Well, it stinks," Madmartigan growled. "This whole thing stinks."
"Ignore him, Willow,"
Roselle said.
"He's a fool."
Madmartigan glared at her.
"Repeat the incantations,"
she instructed, unruffled. Willow stirred the mixture with Charlandria's wand. "Earth, water, sky. What's next?"
"Fire,"
she said.
"It must be burned to a fine ash."
"How are we going to get fire?" Willow asked, frustrated. The torches were all out of reach. Calmly, Madmartigan dug a flint out of his pocket and scratched it against the cell. Sparks showered down. He grinned. "Ignore him, Willow," he repeated, glancing at Roselle. "He's a fool." He broke off, shoving the flint back into his clothes as someone approached their prison. It was General Kale. Kale stared at Madmartigan. "I know you." "No?" Madmartigan shook his head earnestly. "I'd remember you." "Madmartigan," Kale snarled. No. Madmartigan backed up a step, beginning to sweat. "Madmartigan's dead." "Good," Kale rumbled. "He stole my woman." "He stole mine, too," Madmartigan said indignantly. "I killed him. I'm a master swordsman. Let me out of here, and I'll win this war for you." Kale lunged forward, grabbing Madmartigan by the throat. He yanked him up to the bars. "This war's already won." He flung Madmartigan to the ground and stalked away. Madmartigan picked himself up, slowly and painfully. If only I had a sword, he muttered. He gestured, going through the empty motions of exotic swordplay that were becoming all too familiar to Willow. Willow sighed. If only you'd quit talking about it. He went back to his work, but stopped and looked up again as he heard the baby crying. Alora is sick, he said worriedly. They're not taking care of her.
Willow, worrying won't help her, Roselle said. Finish your work. You must make the wand your own and change me back tonight.
Tonight? Willow protested. I'm not ready.
You'd better be,
she said. They all turned at the sound of boots approaching again. Willow folded the ball of mud into a piece of cloth and stuffed it into his underclothes. Sorcia's lieutenant unlocked the cell door and grabbed Willow, jerking him forward. Peck, he snarled, you're coming with me. He dragged Willow out, slamming the door in Madmartigan's face as he tried to follow. Chapter 11. The lieutenant hauled Willow to Sorcia's tent and shoved him inside. Willow got up and shook himself out just as Sorcia stepped from behind a curtain, still in uniform, holding the crying, coughing baby. There's something wrong with this baby, she said. Make it shut up. She thrust it into Willow's arms impatiently. She has a fever, Willow said, feeling how hot Alora Dannon's tiny body was, even through her wrappings. This is bad. Sorcia frowned. Do something, Peck. She's wrapped up too tight. She can hardly breathe. Willow began to loosen the blankets around her. Do you think she's hungry? Sorcia asked, irritable and anxious all at once. I tried to feed her, but she just spat it out. I'm not a mother. The baby quieted as Willow made her comfortable. My son Rannon had this cough, and he almost died, he said, his mind racing. We need lots of steam. Here. He held the baby out to her. No, Sorcia stepped back. She'll start crying again. Hold her up, on your left shoulder, Willow instructed. She likes that. Sorcia took the baby reluctantly, following his advice. Alora Dannon lay against her shoulder, resting quietly, while Willow hooked a pot of water over the fire. With his back to Sorcia, he took the pouch of mud from his pocket and set it ablaze. Who's that horrible friend of yours? Sorcia asked, patting the baby's back awkwardly. You mean Madmartigan? Willow asked. Madmartigan, yes, Sorcia answered, contempt dripping from the words. Who is he? Willow shrugged. I don't know very much about him. He's very bold, Sorcia said. He says he's a master swordsman, Willow volunteered. Sorcia laughed. We'll see about that, she murmured. The mud flared up and burned to ash. Startled, Willow dropped it. He turned, facing Sorcia so that she wouldn't notice. Bring Alora here, near the steam. Somebody will have to stay up with her all night to make sure she keeps breathing. He saw fear flicker across Sorcia's face, just as he had hoped. She crouched down and handed him the baby. Don't let her die, Peck, she said. My mother needs her alive. She turned away and went back into the sleeping area of her tent. Quickly, Willow scooped up the ash and stuffed it into his pocket. Then he settled down at Alora Dannon's side to watch over her through the night. Madmartigan woke with a start as Willow was thrown back into their cell at dawn. What happened? He asked. Alora was sick, Willow said, but she's going to be all right now. He looked up at Roselle. Roselle, I did it. I fired the potion.
Good. We are ready.
Roselle nodded.
You must transform me. Quick, get me down.
Willow picked up a stick and poked it through the bars, trying to reach her. The stick wasn't long enough. Madmartigan, help me, he called. Madmartigan got to his feet wearily and poked at the cage with his stick, straining as far as his arm would reach, barely keeping his balance. Abruptly, the cage crashed to the ground and shattered. Madmartigan lost his balance, banged his head on the bars, and fell down. Roselle scampered up to his face and nipped his ear disdainfully. Ow, 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 Madmartigan yelled. Willow, why don't you help me instead of chattering with this muskrat?
Muskrat, Roselle exclaimed. When I change back into my former self and can use Shalandria's wand, I will open this cell, crush this army, and take Alora Dannon to Tirazleen, where she will be safe.
She nipped Willow's finger this time. Ow, Willow cried. What'd you bite me for?
You must put 3 drops of your blood in the potion, she said matter-of-factly.
Well, you could have warned me, Willow muttered.
Now,
Roselle instructed.
Rub it on the wand and make it your own.
Willow touched the wand with his bleeding finger. Putting all his attention into the task, Madmartigan watched, silent for once.
What is a sorcerer's greatest power?
Roselle asked. His will, Willow answered, remembering the things she had taught him on the long journey here.
Use it, she said. Remember everything I have taught you. For beginners there is some pain, but don't let anything break your concentration.
The silence stretched as Willow held up the wand. He began to chant softly. We have arrived, a high, arrogant voice announced. Hello, everybody, Franjean hopped into the cell. You are saved, Rool cried, following him in. Shh, 3 voices echoed at once. Franjean and Rool looked up, insulted, as Willow began to chant again. What are you going to look like, Roselle, if this works? Madmartigan asked.
Quiet,
Roselle hissed.
Don't interrupt.
Sorry, Madmartigan said, chastened. Luatha, Willow chanted. Danalora. Roselle looked at Madmartigan again.
I am young and more beautiful than you could ever imagine.
Madmartigan glanced at the possum, and a sudden flicker of interest showed in his eyes. Concentrate, Willow, he urged. Willow closed his eyes, channeling every bit of his will into his work. Danalora, Avalorium, Grenan, Luatha, Danu, Danu, Danalora, Luatha, Danu.
No, Willow,
Roselle gasped.
You're losing me.
Her voice began to squawk oddly, her body contorted, and her fur began to change into something else, into black feathers. With a shimmer of magical force, she was transformed into a bird. Willow collapsed on the ground, rubbing his sore wrist, and dropped the smoking wand. Uh-oh, Franjean muttered. The Nelwyn butchered that one. Nice try, Willow. Madmartigan leaned down to help him up, finally impressed by the unquestionable power he had seen Willow wield. You all right? But Willow's only concern now was his failure. He looked up at the raven. Now how are you going to get out? He shook his head in frustration. Oh, Franjean brightened. You want out? Easy, Rool added. We can pick the lock. I'm sorry, Roselle, Willow said, still gazing at her.
My fault,
she croaked impatiently.
You weren't ready. Farmers. Shalendria sends me farmers.
She ruffled her shining black wings. The 2 brownies scrambled up the cell bars and began to pry the lock open with Franjean's spear. Madmartigan leaned over, studying their technique. Franjean elbowed Rool aside. No, like this. Here, Madmartigan said, let me try. Get back, you stupid Taikini. Franjean snapped. He whacked Madmartigan across the nose with his hip pouch. Sparkling dust of broken heart flew into Madmartigan's face, and he rubbed his eyes, sneezing. The lock clicked open as the brownies gave it one last jab. There, Franjean exclaimed. You are free. Come on, Madmartigan, Willow called, heading for the open door. Let's get Elora Danan out of here. Madmartigan straightened up with a dazed look on his face. He bumped into the doorway as he followed Willow out.
Wait,
Roselle called.
What about me?
She flapped her wings in exasperation and flew up into the sky above their heads. Willow led the way through the still dark camp to Sorce's tent, carrying Franjean and Rool, ducking aside to avoid the patrolling guards. He looked back, wondering what was making Madmartigan so slow. The Daikini was sauntering along as if he were out for a spring stroll and staring at the sky. Madmartigan, Willow whispered. Look at the sky, Willow, Madmartigan said softly. The sun's coming up, but you can still see the stars. Isn't that beautiful? Willow stared at him, nonplussed. Franjean and Rool glanced guiltily at each other, remembering the fairy dust. Are you all right? Willow asked. Never better, Madmartigan nodded. I feel good. He smiled, an easy, relaxed smile, as if the nearest enemy soldier were hundreds of miles away. Willow shot him another dubious look and pulled up the back wall of Sorce's tent. They peered inside. I left Elora right there on those furs, Willow whispered. Only one of us should go in there, Madmartigan murmured. I've had experience with this sort of thing. I know what I'm doing. Right then, Willow was not so sure about that, but he nodded.
Hurry, hurry,
Roselle called. Madmartigan crawled inside. He stood up slowly, peering around in the dim candlelight until he spotted Elora Danan asleep in the far corner of the tent. He crept past Sorce's bed. As he passed it, he looked down at her, then stopped. Out of her armor, and wearing soft nightclothes, with her long red hair lying like satin around her, she looked like a sleeping goddess. He had never seen anyone so beautiful. He bent down and kissed her gently. As he pulled away again, he whispered, so softly that even he barely heard it, I love you. Uh-oh, Rool muttered, as the others watching the scene unfold with horrified eyes. Madmartigan, what are you doing? Willow hissed. Get going! He waved his hand frantically. Madmartigan glanced up, seeming to remember his duty again, but instead he pressed his hands to his heart and cried, "Oh, Sorsha, awake from this hateful sleep. It deprives me of your beauty, the beauty of your eyes." Sorsha's green eyes opened, blinked, and then a dagger flashed out from beneath her bedsheet, aimed at Madmartigan. "One move, jackass," she snarled. Madmartigan held his hands out to her. "You are my moon, my sun, my starlit sky. Without you I dwell in darkness. I love you." Willow gaped a moment longer, then crept into the tent, sneaking past the two unlikely lovers. "What are you doing here?" Sorsha demanded, more incredulous and angry now. "Your power has enchanted me, and I stand helpless against it," Madmartigan said passionately. "Come to me now, tonight. Let me worship you in my arms." "Get away from me!" Sorsha shouted, sure that she was facing a madman now. Her dagger caught in his shirt and slid it right up to his throat, but the point stopped there, trembling. "I love you," Madmartigan said. "Stop saying that," Sorsha cried. "How can I stop the beating of my heart?" he asked. He caught her free hand and clasped it against his naked chest. Her other hand pressed the dagger's point against his throat. "Out of fear," she snapped. "Out of love," he insisted, with no fear at all in his eyes. "I can stop it," she said fiercely. "I'll kill you." "Death next to love is a trivial thing," declared Madmartigan. "Your touch is worth 100,000 deaths." He let go of her hand, but she did not pull it away from his chest. Instead, her trembling body leaned toward him, as if it were drawn by some irresistible force, until their lips were close enough for a kiss. And then suddenly, the tent canvas tore open and Cale stepped inside, carrying Willow, who still clutched Elora-Danan in his arms. "What's going on here?" Cale bellowed. He hurled Willow and the baby into the heap of straw as Sorsha pulled back from Madmartigan and saw the empty crib. "Deceiver!" she cried. She lunged at Madmartigan again, raising her dagger. He rolled backward, kicking the dagger out of her hand and grabbing her sword, which lay beside the bed. Leaping up, he cut down the center pole of the tent. As the tent collapsed around them, he caught hold of her and finished what they had almost begun, giving her a passionate kiss. The tent engulfed them all in darkness. Rizal flew in circles high overhead, screeching with distress as she looked down on the chaos below her. Bodies writhed under the fallen mass of canvas, and then a blade slit through the heavy cloth, flashing silver in the dawn light. Madmartigan leaped out, and as soldiers surrounded him, he whipped Sorsha's sword around him in the series of intricate maneuvers he had done so often before, with sticks. But this time, the sword was a real one, and this time his skill was undeniably real too. He fought several men at once, drawing them off, backing slowly toward the edge of the steep mountain slope. Behind him, Willow crawled out from under the corner of the tent, carrying the baby. He watched in wonder as Madmartigan took on one Nockmaar soldier after another, littering the snow with bodies and weapons. Madmartigan saw him staring and bowed with a flourish. Whoops! And slipped on the ice, catching himself just in time. A shield slid past him over the slick surface of the ground. "Willow!" he shouted with sudden inspiration. "Jump on the shield!" Just then, a black broadsword gashed open the tent and Cale climbed through, snarling. "Bowmen! Horses! After them!" Willow and Madmartigan ran toward the shield, with more soldiers pursuing them. All around them, archers took aim. Willow clambered aboard the makeshift sled with Elora-Danan, but Madmartigan stopped, looking back as Sorsha emerged from the tent to stand beside Cale. "I didn't betray you, Sorsha," he shouted. "I love you." Arrows rained down on him, and he leapt onto the shield. Sorsha stared after them as they plunged down the mountainside, with Rizal shrieking and flapping over their heads. "After them!" Cale bellowed. A squad of horsemen charged down the precarious mountain slope after the sled shield. Franjean and Rool crawled out from under the tent. "Where did everybody go?" Franjean asked, looking around in confusion. Rool shrugged and scratched his head. Chapter 12. Willow hugged the baby tightly and crouched between Madmartigan's legs as the shield plummeted down the mountainside, zigzagging through the trees. He looked back and saw the Nockmaar horsemen floundering in the snow that gave the shield such terrifying speed. He gasped as it soared over another snowdrift and thudded down on the other side. Up above, Rizal screeched with fright as they sailed on, gaining more speed, barely missing trees and rocks as Madmartigan steered them by shifting his weight. Suddenly, Willow's eyes widened. Dead ahead of them was a huge wall of ice. Willow shut his eyes as the shield sped toward the wall. At the last moment, Madmartigan shifted his weight again, steering them into a small crevice. Rizal soared high up into the sky, barely missing the wall, and lost sight of them as they disappeared inside the glacier. They plummeted and swayed downward through a long tube of ice, picking up speed like a toboggan. The tunnel looped suddenly, a full 360 degrees, carrying them with it through a breathtaking moment of upside-down vertigo before it expelled them into daylight and into the air. Madmartigan and Willow screamed in terror as the shield shot out over the mountainside like an arrow, but Elora Danan, safe in Willow's arms, laughed in delight. The shield slammed down onto the lower part of the mountain slope, knocking Willow's breath out of him. Behind him, he felt Madmartigan lose his grip and fall off. Madmartigan disappeared in the deep snow behind them before Willow could lift a hand. The shield rebounded again and slid on down the mountainside, speeding toward a village he could now see below. Willow leaned hard to one side as the slope ended, bringing the shield to a halt in a shower of snow just outside the village. "Are you all right, Elora?" he gasped. She cooed, waving her hands. "Everything is going to be fine when you get to Tirazleen," he said, more to reassure himself than her. The village children who had gathered around him pointed up the slope. Squealing with excitement, he looked around. A huge snowball tumbled toward him, past him, and on into the middle of the village. It crashed to a stop against a building wall, scattering townspeople every which way. Willow leaped up from the shield with Elora Danan and hurried to join the gaping crowd of villagers. A sword jabbed out through the snowball, chipping away ice. Then Madmartigan crawled out, shaking his head. "Madmartigan!" Willow cried, relieved and furious all at once. Madmartigan stood up and tried to walk, staggering and blinking. "What happened up there?" he mumbled, looking back up the hill as if he couldn't remember how he'd gotten here. "You started spouting poetry," Willow said indignantly. "I did?" Madmartigan stared at him. "I love you, Sorsha. I worship you, Sorsha. You almost got us killed." Madmartigan gave himself a sharp whack on the side of his head, trying to unscramble his brain. "I love you, Sorsha," he said incredulously. "I don't love her. She kicked me in the face. I hate her." "Don't I?" Willow was saved from answering by Rizal's sudden screech overhead.
"Kill! Kill!"
she cried. The villagers turned and looked up the mountainside with fear in their eyes. "Nockmar troops!" someone shouted. They ran toward their houses. Madmartigan grabbed a passing stranger. "They're after us." The man nodded. "Come with us." The villagers dragged them in through the cottage door, just as Kale's squad thundered into the town. They were hustling into a dusty storage cellar. As their eyes adjusted, they realized that they were not alone. Several other men were already hidden there. A large hand clamped over Madmartigan's shoulder. "I knew you'd get out of that rat trap," a familiar voice said. Madmartigan spun around and slammed Eric Thalbear up against the wall. "You left me to die, Eric," he rasped. "I probably saved your life," Eric said soberly. "We were slaughtered. I lost many braves." Eric's one surviving captain looked up through the ceiling beams. "Keep quiet," he hissed. Madmartigan looked around him at the war-battered men who shared the cellar with him. Most of them were wounded. All of them were exhausted and discouraged. He thought that perhaps Eric had done him a favor after all. Willow held the baby close, shushing her as she began to whimper, and more hoofbeats sounded outside. Perched on a rooftop, Rizal watched as Sorsha joined Kale and his men. "Where is that baby?" Kale demanded. "Sorsha, look everywhere. Pick this village apart." His men went from house to house, kicking down doors, searching with ruthless thoroughness. Sorsha slid down from her horse, joining the search with 3 of her men. She entered the house where Willow and the others waited in hiding. Madmartigan, Eric, and the rebel captains watched through the ceiling boards as boots pounded the floor overhead, shaking dust down into their eyes. Madmartigan saw Sorsha, not sure what he felt as he looked at her. No one breathed. Willow squeezed the baby against his chest. Sorsha and her soldiers searched the house but found nothing. They started back toward the door, heading out. Elora Danan let out a sudden cry. The soldiers stopped dead and drew their swords, but the baby's crying was drowned out by a loud screech as Rizal flapped in through a window and flew madly around the rafters, calling and shrieking. In the cellar, everyone breathed again. Willow put his finger to Elora Danan's mouth to pacify her and sang her a lullaby very quietly. But as Sorsha started for the door, she glanced down and hesitated. She brushed spilled grain aside with her boot and saw the outline of a trap door to the cellar. She jerked it open. Outside, Cale rode away with 10 men to search along the riverbank. The rebels crossed down as the cellar door opened, casting a shaft of dusty light across their tense faces. Sorsha descended the stairs cautiously, followed by one of her soldiers. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, Eric and Madmartigan lunged forward. Eric stabbed the soldier, and Madmartigan leaped after Sorsha. She dodged aside, lightning quick, and managed to shout, "Down here!" before Madmartigan's knife point reached her throat. The 2 other soldiers, waiting above, ran down the steps, but stopped short as they looked into the eyes of Eric's rebels. Holding Sorsha hostage, Madmartigan forced them back up the stairs. Elora Danan began to cry in earnest. "Keep that baby quiet," Eric said impatiently. "But she needs to be changed," Willow said, climbing the stairs after him. Some things could not be ignored, even in the middle of a war. The rebels disarmed the Nockmar soldiers and hurled them into a corner. The air in the room was thick with urgency and fear. Willow changed the baby's diaper rags as quickly as he could, while Madmartigan kept watch at the window, guarding Sorsha. "Nockmar scum," he muttered, watching the soldiers destroy the village outside. "You'll never defeat us." Sorsha tossed her head. "Give up the baby." She tried to pull free, and Madmartigan clamped his hand over her mouth. Eric squatted down by Willow, studying the baby. "What does Bavmorda want with this child, anyway?" "She's a princess," Willow said. "We're taking her to Tir Asleen." "Tir Asleen?" Eric said. "Nobody's been there in years. Even if you could find it, Peck, she's right. You'd never get past the Nockmar army." "There's an even bigger army at Tir Asleen, if we can just get there," Willow answered, not wanting to hear anyone claim otherwise. Eric got up and went to stand beside Madmartigan, while Willow rigged a new carrying pack for the baby. "I've lost more than half my men fighting Bavmorda," Eric said, frowning at Madmartigan. "Now you and this Peck are going to take her on? You've always said you serve no one, Madmartigan. Since when are you a crusader?" Madmartigan didn't answer. "He's not going to help you, Peck," Eric said to Willow. "He's a worthless thief." Madmartigan jerked around. "I am not a thief, Eric." "He's not a thief," Willow said. "Are you?" He broke off suddenly, wondering what Madmartigan really was. Madmartigan looked down, wondering the same thing. Finally, Madmartigan raised his head again. "I serve the No One, Eric," he said. "Want to join us?" "You'll never make it, Madmartigan." Eric shook his head. Then, once again, we say goodbye. Madmartigan turned away. The 2 men began to put on cloaks and armor. "One day, one of us will stand on the other's grave," Eric murmured. Madmartigan looked up at him. "I hope it's not today." He opened the door, pushing Sorsha out ahead of him. Willow followed cautiously. Madmartigan helped Willow and the baby onto a horse, and then hauled Sorsha up in front of him on another mount. She struggled and screamed, and the Nockmar soldiers, still searching the town, spun around and looked their way. "Sorsha!" a lieutenant shouted. The soldiers surrounded them, with drawn bows aimed at the escaping prisoners' hearts. "Weapons down or she's dead," Madmartigan warned. No one moved, but no one fired. "Get going, Willow," he ordered. Willow rode away, looking back over his shoulder. Madmartigan eased his own horse out of the town, holding Sorsha in front of him like a shield. When he was out of arrow range, he swung his mount around, making it rear up in defiance, and galloped away. "Get to your horses," the lieutenant ordered. "After them." But as he turned back, Eric and his men burst out of fighting to attack the Nockmar troops. The furious villagers joined them, wielding shovels and spears. One soldier escaped the trap and started after Willow and Madmartigan. "Forget them," the lieutenant shouted, breaking free and spurring his own horse. "Get Cale." They rode off together, leaving the rest of the men to fight a losing battle.